just getting a little technical, but that's part of why we're here.
Yeah.
Could you advance to the 2 slides ahead?
Sure, sure.
Can you tell us a little bit more about this third point? And here's what's behind my question.
Yeah.
When I started teaching online 10 or more years ago, there was a lure to the quality of what we could deliver.
Yeah.
And it was particularly regarding this interaction with students and discussion boards, whatever. And after several years, I just started to fall asleep. It was like they were at their keyboard just poking stuff in there because they were asked to do that.
Yep.
Can you share with us how you saw this evolve for yourself as an instructor? You're tying in now the ideal of, wow, this is really rich. We're getting some better stuff.
Yeah.
How did that happen for
Sure,
you?
sure. No, that's a really good question. Because again, like you said, when I look at discussion boards, when I say, okay, I want, for each project, students are supposed to do a group submission, right? And that was the big, long essays that we saw. And they're supposed to do an individual post, right? They're supposed to read someone else's, reflect upon it, and then give a thoughtful answer in 2 to 3 sentences or a paragraph, right? Yeah, it doesn't happen, right? They give the group assignment and then they read the first persons that they click on. They say, I like this because it has a nice picture, or he does it. It's not thoughtful, it's not engaging at all, right? I totally agree, and that's what I was struggling with as part of this. But with this one, at least, because I don't know why it is, what the psychology of it is, but I said, okay, in your individual responses, you can use that response time to persuade me that your submission should win out over someone else's. You have to give facts for it. You can't just say because it's cooler. But you have to give me some examples. I was giving them a chance to again, kind of an opportunity to make their case a little bit more. And that's where I saw an improvement. It was in this example right here when I was adding a reason for them to be submitting an individual post that they could see a benefit to besides just getting, the assignment done with. And so that was, to me, it was like, that worked out really well for me. So that was the example for me then, that when I added that little bit of, why am I doing this? Well, that's why you're doing this. This is why you're giving me an individual response. Not because I'm telling you to, but because you have a chance to make your case and get some points. And that added a little bit more of a motivation for them.
Did they keep it positive?
Yeah, I told them you had to keep it positive. You have to give me positive reasons for why yours is better. And I should have brought some examples with me, but they were saying, well, mine encapsulates the entirety of racism, or mine talks about how they're directly tying in they're doing a better job of tying in the product with empire, right? So we had one on Stanley's shoelaces. So Stanley was the guy who went out and found Livingston in Africa, and he was this great explorer, and they made a shoelace that was named after him, kind of like Air Jordans, right? And the box has a picture of Stanley meeting Livingston in the African bush, right? And Stanley shoelaces. If you like Stanley, wear the shoelaces. So that was theirs. They gave me some examples and some reasons, and they're longer, and they were getting more detailed with more research behind them, because again I was adding that second layer of motivation, bribery, whatever you want to call it. So John, do you want me to wrap it up, or do you want me to talk about the epic fail?
Do you guys want to hear about the fail, or do you want to start this? All right, let's do the fail.
All right, so I gave you 2 examples, or I gave you 3 examples. The first was the one where the assignments were boring, and I just gave them 2 things to read, and they had to comment on it. No one liked it. I gave you the one about the Band-Aid and how there was lots of limitations of what they were supposed to read, and I gave them, but there's more open on what they could read, but I gave them the list of reading materials. And then there was the colonial advertising, where they had a lot more breadth of what they could do, but I still gave them lots of details of how they were supposed to search for things, where they were going to find it. This is the one that totally fell apart. So fascism is the 1930s. So I'm talking about European imperialism. And Europeans not only colonized China and Africa and India, but they also tried to colonize each other, right? And so fascism is a great example of that, and talking about the lead up to World War II. And so I wanted to explain to students, I wanted to demonstrate why people like Hitler and Mussolini were popular, right? They may have become dictators, but they were elected officials when they started out their career. What was popular about fascism in the 1920s and 1930s? And so I really wanted to talk about the contested nature of European politics in the 20s and 30s during the Depression and the aftermath of World War I. I wanted to talk about the fight between democratic liberalism, fascism, and socialism, this epic struggle that was occurring in the 1930s. We're going to discuss it. And here we have a picture right here of how Americans were also some Americans were supportive of the fascists. So this is the American fascist organization. And so we have, George Washington with the swastikas on either side of him. That's nice and disturbing. So this turned out to be an epic fail, largely because I didn't give them a couple things. So anyone recognize this guy? Or we'll talk about him. You should look up ancient aliens. So problems. I did not give students enough direction. I gave them a topic. I gave them suggestions on where they could go, right? But I didn't add enough constraints, right? I gave them way too much flexibility in how they're going to approach the topic, and I didn't give them enough constraints on where the limitations were going to be. All right? So we kind of see a progression here, and this is how I set up the presentation, from lots of constraints, too much constraints, to opening it up gradually, hitting that nice sweet spot with the colonial advertising. This was taking it too far. Not enough constraints. I did not anticipate a toxic combination of the standard student research strategies of clicking on the first thing they find on Google with all the weird stuff online about fascists. Right? So there's all kinds of weird stuff online. Most of it's total hunk. It's conspiracy theories. It's pseudoscience. It's just weird things. A lot like Ancient Aliens on the History Channel. Right? Have you ever seen Ancient Aliens? Let me encapsulate for you. Pyramids, aliens. Tower of Babel, aliens. Athens, aliens. Rome, probably the aliens. Machu Picchu, definitely the aliens. Let's see. Rhodes, maybe, I don't know, but let's just say aliens anyways. So Ancient Aliens is a TV show on the History Channel that basically explains all of ancient history through the prism of aliens coming into Earth and breeding with humans, telling humans what to do. It's a horrible show in terms of history. It's a great show in terms of comedy, and it highlights all the things I hate about the History Channel as a historian. So this is their spokesperson, who's not really, I don't know what he is, but he has really great hair, and he looks kind of crazy, so that's why I have him as a picture for everything that's wrong with history. So I didn't give them enough parameters on what to do. And the other thing I was finding, students look at the first thing they find on Google, right? Well, what dictates what we find on Google? Often it's the words that we're using. So this is the assignment right here, right? And you can see I gave them some examples of what to look for. I had a ton of archived material that I've done research in the UK, and I had a lot of stuff on fascists in Britain in the 1930s. So Oswald Mosley was the big fascist leader in the 1930s in Great Britain. I had a lot of stuff from his newspapers, so I gave them the resources from there. I had some stuff on French fascism as well, some really good resources. And I had a lot of different places where they could go to find stuff on fascism. But I said, just go out and look. And remember, in that second assignment on imperial advertising, I told them how to find Google searches, right? I also gave them a long, detailed list of the companies that used empire within their advertising techniques. I didn't do that here, right? I just gave them a couple examples. I didn't give them enough parameters, enough guidance. Also, the problem as well was the instructions I had. So they could look at examples of fascist support in America and Europe, right? So Britain, France, Holland, Norway. So look at support for for fascism. And you look at these words that I was using. Support, support, support. Support, support, support. Nazis, Nazis, Nazis. Fascists, fascists, fascists. Right? So let's put this into a Google search. And what were some of the words that students were using? American support for fascism. Right? American support for Nazis. U.S. support for Nazis. Support is a big word here. Fascism as well. And look at this one right here. Rational revolution. Rational revolution. 1, 2 over. Oh, it's now the third one. Rational revolution. Right? Remember this guy right here? Yeah, Rational revolution. That's basically the equivalent. A crazy guy with a blog. Right? That's what students, every student that looked at fascism in America, even the projects that actually weren't as bad as some, they all referenced that one source. Yep.
Aliens.
And
You ever talked with your current students about this kind of fail?
we talked about that. Yep. Again, re-emphasizing the importance of discussion afterwards. But yeah, so yeah, actually, the Ancient Aliens guy, they do Hitler as aliens as well. Sorry. So anyways, how did the Germans get all that fancy technology in World War II? It was the aliens. So anyways, so this project totally failed. Everyone that talked about American fascism all used this really horrible blog site that was all conspiracy theory, right? It basically said because Americans, businesses were in Germany during the 1930s, that Hitler's rise was a direct relation to Henry Ford. It's just basically making these really causal relationships and blowing them out of proportion. So they weren't working at all. So it demonstrates the continued importance of post-project class discussion. You're like, well, how does that work? Well, all the problems that we had at the project, when we discussed the next day, we had a chance to reflect and talk about them, right? It was a great opportunity to talk about the problems with sources and where they were doing research and why they were finding the sources that they were. I said, you guys are researching based upon the first thing you find on Google, right? You aren't digging in deeper. And why are you finding this on Google? Was it because that's the best source out there? No, it's because you put in these search parameters and you all put in very similar search parameters, and the reason you put in those search parameters was because of the essay or the instructions you just read that I wrote that emphasized these certain words that were found in the metadata for that website. It wasn't the best website, it was just the one that you were implicitly conditioned to find. Right? So we talked about that, talked about how Google works and how you do research online. It was a great opportunity to walk through that. And really, I found that even as I was basically saying you guys' projects were crap, right? They were really communicative, right? Because they had an investment in this, right? They're like, well, I found this. Henry Ford was an anti-Semite, yes, but was the entire American business community anti-Semitic? No. Because there's lots of Jews who were also in that American business community. There's a lot of people who had very good relations with the Jewish community that were in the business community. We had a lot of discussion about this. It was really good. And so despite the horrible submissions, we had a really good discussion about fascism in the 1930s because we were able to take what wasn't working and we're able to talk about what was working and kind of put this together in some really good feedback. Right? That was interactive, and everyone was learning from each other's mistakes, and that's what I really liked about it. And so I'll definitely do this project again, but it'll be much more akin to the Do They Know It's Christmas project, where I give them a lot more constraints in what they're doing. So now I've talked for much longer than John usually would like, but that's it. So.
All right. So as we were putting together the sheet for this week, it was really difficult because it wasn't a technical, like how do you press the right buttons to learn how to do this stuff. This process of Webquests is really a lot more, I think, as you're understanding more about your thinking behind it than it is about technology. The technology is just that the students use Google and click on the first or third link that they see, apparently. rationalrevolution.net.
Yes.
It's a good site to remember to look that one up.
It'll be entertaining.
Now, the word Webquests has a very... The traditional Webquest was created by, I'm going to forget. Bernie Dodge in 1995, thank you, San Diego State University. And it has these 6 components here that are these first 6 bullet points on your list. And if you go to a place like Sunwall.com, and we can do that and look through, they have thousands of them. They're all organized according to these 6 components, and the green diagram on the right-hand side there is on the left side of the Sunwall.com Webquests. And as you go through them, you can go through the introduction, and you can see what the task for the students is, and then the process explains how they go about doing this. And so these are where the constraints are. The resources are the sites that students will use to complete the task. And this is one of the things that's a lot different between probably what a K-12 Webquest, traditional Webquest would be, and something that we'd want to do at a research university. In the K-12 world, for Webquests, they will give the students, go to these 5 sites. You know, don't go, if you don't want to go to rationalrevolution.net, don't put it in those 5 sites, you know, the list of 5 sites. So you're not, it's kind of more of a reading comprehension thing where the reading materials are on the internet than it is sort of a quest go do your own thing and find this, find your own resources as a college student. So I felt that was a little bit limiting, especially at a research university at the college level. I think the important thing with this is to just give them a compelling issue. Take a compelling issue in your field and give them a little bit of guidance, not too much and not too little though, that sweet spot, that Goldilocks spot of guidance, and have them go out on their own. And I've come up with a couple of an easy one, another easy one, and sort of a medium and an advanced ways of doing this. And this is just 4 ways among probably 100 different ways of creating these sort of web quests. One that I've had my students do is find a TED Talk that talks about education and explain what the purpose of education is based on that. And it's just a 1-paragraph summary of the TED Talk. They embed the TED Talk on their WordPress site. They give a 1-paragraph summary of it, and then some takeaways, a bullet list of takeaways. Very simple web quest as far as the creating it. Then by posting it on WordPress, they can see what everybody else does. They don't have to watch the 18-minute TED Talk of everybody else. They can just read their scan the short paragraph that everybody else read about or wrote about it, and then they can decide, oh, that sounds like an interesting one. Maybe I'll read that based on that 1 paragraph and the takeaways. So they can start to do that. I did another one. I teach a freshman Wisconsin experience seminar that talks about how to survive the university. So another one was YouTube videos on study tips. And there are thousands of YouTube videos on study tips that are hundreds of which, probably thousands of which, are terrible, but some of them are pretty good. And so having the students go through and each find one, write a paragraph and some takeaways, is a short, little, easy web quest.
Can I just ask?
Yeah.
Lane, this is your area of expertise and academic focus. And I'd be curious to know a couple things. If you've written on this scholarly, in any scholarly publication, or have you come across from this WebQuest undergraduate student research content any good art? Because I think a number of us as instructors intuitively have this. You've hit the nail on the head from an expertise perspective of, and here's the result. Here's the real positives, here's the fail, and here's why. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's, with what has happened research-wise for undergraduates with the web, this is huge. And I'm wondering, are there good resources? If you haven't written, I encourage you.
Oh yeah, I haven't actually. But
I'm just thinking for all of us as undergraduate instructors to add to our own knowing about the importance of mapping out this process well so our students can get the good content.
yeah, there is some of the resources that that I know about and that I was utilizing for as I was kind of looking for how to create the projects, why I was going to do things a certain way. The website that Learning Support Services put up is Teaching with Tech. I don't know if anyone's seen it. So teachingwithtech.com. What? It might be. I should look that up. But anyways, so Teaching with Tech is an online course on teaching with technology, and they have on Module 4, they have some resources on how to create some of these assignments. So Teaching with Tech, I think, is I'll look this up. Give me at the end of the period here. But yeah, Teaching with Tech and then Module 4, I believe, is the one where it's going to have some resources on that. That's what I was using for some of this material. So yeah. Good question, and yeah, you're trying not to just keep on reinventing the wheel, and you're trying to experiment because you want to see, well, what are other people doing, and how can I improve on it? Yep. Good question.
So I want to get some of your thoughts and ideas on this as well. What sorts of things can you see this being used for in your fields?
I kind of have a question. Have you thought about, you presented the last activity as a fail, but I don't see it as a fail. I see it more as an opportunity. And what John just pointed out, that many of those WebQuest things, because of their simple nature, are for K-12 assignments. But I think creating a WebQuest like you did, making it a meta WebQuest, where students first are programmed to fail, and then the second part of the activity is actually unpacking that fail.
Yeah.
And making sure that you
really
generate
good.
a list of why they found what they found and why this does not necessarily work. And how do you prevent that from happening in the future? Because I think what they will do in their lives, most of them will not become university academic researchers, and most of them will use Google and other similar resources to find things. So teaching them about possible pitfalls of that and how to balance it, that would be a perfect.
Yeah, I think that so changing.
The fascism.
Yeah, and I think really from the original learning objectives, it was a fail, right? Because they didn't really do the exact what I was laying out. But I think if you're changing some of the parameters, and what I think you're highlighting that I through that discussion afterwards is what I was doing. I think reapplying how those learning objectives are set up, doing the meta side of it, like you're going to be using those words a lot to kind of direct you towards these websites, and then say, okay, this is what happens when you're doing a Google search, and why you're going to find the sources you do. That's really smart. Yeah, I really like that. So
I think there will come in the regular, non-university lives, there will come across many of those very charged topics.
Yeah.
That range from what's good food. Well, there will be some blogs that are way out there that will ask you to eat just one thing, one type of beans forever, and you need to understand where the scary stuff starts.
Yeah.
Then you are going to go and check something about the medication that someone in your family takes. And once again, you will have the core, the center, and then you will have the fringes. And you need to be able to distinguish at what kind of fluid point it's crossed over too much. And I think that was a perfect activity for that, because they inadvertently crossed over too much.
That's right, yeah.
And then making them realize that, even people who are at the university can cross over to the first thing is instructive.
And
I think it's a great activity.
Yeah, it's kind of like the burned hand teaches best, right? I mean, not only just telling them, if you do this is what's going to happen, it's going to be all screwed up, but showing them and having them participate in that, burning their hands, so to speak, but then saying, this is what we're going to be learning from that. I think that's really smart. Yeah, thank you for that comment.
Any other thoughts, questions?
Another question.
Yeah.
Which is totally off topic, so I'll wait until I have a question about one of the slides that you showed.
Oh, sure. This is that site I was talking about. LSS.wisc.edu. Module 4, Active Learning, has the resources for some of the stuff that I was finding. So if that's what this is Learning Support Services, we put this website up, some of the consulting staff. And so, but you wanted me to go, does everyone have that? And lss.wisc. So, oops, there we go. Which slide were you looking for, George?
So this is the big question. Actually, something we were discussing at the School of Nursing recently. I noticed at the slide where you showed the activity, so it's like slide maybe...
Sure, the instructions?
Yes,
yeah.
This. So this is something not related to today's topic, but you use the reverse chronological order for your weeks.
Yes.
That is something that we're having a big discussion about, because we often run into the problems where faculty set up their semester in chronological order. So we're starting with week 1, week 2, week 3. And then, of course, by the time we get to week 15, you have to scroll all the way down. Then you click on it, and then you get this blank thing in front of you, because, of course, the instructions are at the very top, which we're now, 12 weeks down.
Yep.
You have to scroll back, and some people click and say, there's nothing there. Well, go back to the top. How popular is it among the rest of you? Do you use reverse chronological? We were hoping that there was a way for faculty to set it up in a chronological order, and we were desperately trying to find a magic switch checkbox that would reverse it then, but there isn't one.
What I do, and what I always advocate to be done, is what I do is it rotates, and it's super easy to do in D2L today, is that each week I put the top week at the top, because that's where they're going to look at first. My goal with the students is to make it as easy as possible to access the material I want them to look at, because I don't want them to have to think about, how do I get to this? I just want them to do it, right? And so I always rotate it. So at week 1 was at the top. But what I do is, it's now, when I did this, is week 11 is at the top. And all of these then are underneath it, and then the last couple weeks, all the last weeks then are at the bottom, so they can access it. So it always rotates through. And all you have to do is you click and drag it. You just click and drag one. All I do is each week as I take this week, so at the end of this week I'll take week 11, I'll throw it at the bottom. And then week 12 will just rotate up to the top. So, yep.
And I put it in a news item. I put a direct link to the, whatever the week is in the news item with
Yep.
more instructions and a reminder to make sure that they get it done.
Suggestive advertising. Yes, I do a news feed as well on the homepage and say, this is week 11. Check out we're going to be talking about Kipling. Here's the reading right here, and I have a link to it, so they just have to click on it. It's super easy. And click now, or something on that line. I always suggest that they take the action that I am trying to get them to take. It's the same as the commercial where it says, call now. Call in the next 5 minutes to save $20 on shipping and handling. So.